Hello, dear friends. This is the Military Reporter channel. Today is March 2nd, the first day of spring. Let's start with the Kursk region. Pay attention to the changes over the past 24 hours, which is recorded by the Ukrainian resource deep state. In general, of course, this bridgehead, as the Russian publics claim, has long been cleaned up. This sleeve, the western flank, the western extremity. But now Ukrainian publics also recognize this situation. What else is going on? Let's go to Deep State map and see what we actually have here. Over the last 24 hours, Russian troops have been advancing in several areas. First, there is fighting in the north of the bridgehead towards Malaya Lochnia, and there are clashes directly in the settlement. There is also fighting in the Gribki area, already deep in the rear. Further north, there are attacks by Russian troops south of Malaya Lochnia. In addition, there is an advance of Russian troops from Svornotoy and attempts to attack towards Banderivka. There is no information about Martinivka yet. Also, we should not forget about Cherkasy-Konopelka, where there are also clashes. But that's not the most important thing. I overheard Ukrainian map reviewers, and they talk about a really critical situation on this road. If earlier they generally called it the road of death, now they give specific data. Imagine, there are about 2/10,000, and maybe more, of AFU fighters on this bridgehead. Of course, such a group must be constantly supplied with fuel, ammunition, food, water, transportation of the wounded, and so on. There is constant traffic on this road, cars are going both ways, and they are being hit by fire. Now imagine the casualties. If I were asked, I would say that perhaps every fifth car is destroyed, that is, about 20%, and that is already a huge loss. But Ukrainian sources say that 2 out of 3 are destroyed. The level of losses on this road is about 70%. These are absolutely unthinkable figures. According to NATO standards, allowable losses are up to 15%. If losses reach 15%, the unit is already considered unfit. In fact, there may be no point in mopping up this bridgehead to the end, but simply continue to inflict maximum damage on the Ukrainian armed forces. The feeling is that the losses on this road in recent weeks are much greater than those directly on the bridgehead itself. When did this start? This has been going on for a long time, but the losses reached a critical level after Russian troops managed to cross the border of Sumy region in at least 2 directions, in the Basov area and here in this area. This is recognized even by the Ukrainian media. The Ukrainian armed forces have been unable to hold the Russian-Ukrainian border, and the section of the front in this area is particularly vulnerable. Particularly good progress is being made in the Zuravka area. This settlement is already under the control of the Russian armed forces, and Russian troops are continuing their offensive. In other words, if you look at the map, Russian troops are positioned along this road at a distance of 5 to 10 kilometers, actually parallel to it. For tens of kilometers, the section is under fire control. If the Russian troops are tasked to physically go to this road and cut it off completely, it would mean a cauldron for the entire Ukrainian group. I would like to remind you that the most elite units are located here, and the AFU is supplied by the highest order. This bridgehead is being held as some kind of trump card in possible peace talks between Putin, Zelensky, Trump, or whoever. Although, by and large, the recent events in Washington, as I see it, if not put an end to any peace talks, at least delay the possible end of hostilities for a few months. That is obvious. In general, if you look at it, this whole situation reminds me a lot of the Kurakhove pocket. This is roughly how it looks. And, of course, it will not end well, except for huge losses for the AFU. Yes, of course, Ukrainian broadcasters claim that a huge number of Russian troops are concentrated in this area, which allegedly constrains them and prevents them from being used in other parts of the front, for example, to attack Pokrovsk or in another direction. But they forget one thing. Ukrainian troops are also constrained here, and in an extremely unfavorable tactical and operational situation. Okay, let's move on. There is not a lot of information for March 2nd. Let's move on to Toretsk. Friends, I have some bad news about Toretsk. On February 7th, it was officially announced that the city was taken, but, Apparently, it turned out to be untrue. I got this information from Russian sources, from Z channels. Let's look at the map. Here's a map of Toretsk. Here, as we can see, the areas that are not under the full control of the Russian armed forces are marked in blue. Moreover, these are areas that are still controlled by the AFU. In particular, mine number 10 and the adjacent territory represent the so-called layer cake, pockets of resistance. In other words, the deep state map shows the situation more truthfully. A scandal has already erupted around this topic. Which officer is guilty of reporting upstairs about the allegedly complete capture of Dzerzhinsk, Toretsk? What to call it is not the point. The main thing is that Toretsk has not been taken yet. It turns out that I have been misleading the audience for a month. But that's because I was misled myself. Let's move on. There is practically no information on the Pokrovsk direction, except that there is some advance in the south of this direction here, further towards Novosilka, to the west, from the direction of Uspinovka towards Novoalexandrovka. There is also an offensive from the direction of Serebryannoy towards Bogdanovka. The offensive is not going too fast, but it is developing daily. Now on the Kurakhove direction. Here it is worth noting that Konstantinovka is still under the control of the armed forces of Ukraine. So far it has not been possible to liquidate this hotbed of resistance. What else is interesting? On Velyka, Novosilka, Arum, Kiev and Novi Komar the situation is generally developing quite well. Russian troops continue their offensive to the northwest and have already reached Volny Poli, in the Novosilka area. Here the advance is going on almost daily, which is encouraging as it contributes to the liberation of the Donetsk region. Here is where the border passes, and there is interesting information about the section of the front, about which there has been no information for a long time. Pay attention to the former Kurakhove Reservoir. Now it is gone, it is completely shallow. There were formed swamps, thickets, almost a forest. But that is not what is important. Russian troops are trying to advance to the north, towards Kamenskoye and Pyatikatok. That is, they are advancing along the former Kurakhove Reservoir. There is no information about serious successes so far. Even in Z channels this direction is practically not discussed. However, Ukrainian experts and observers are already sounding the alarm. Time will show how the situation will develop further. Well, the first day of spring. Maybe before yesterday there were still some chances for peace or ceasefire, but now these chances can be practically given a fat cross. Good day, good spring and peace.